that Dorian Gray has been collecting for years, mostly to have new sensations with a lot of sort of artistic allusion and backdrop to it all. But the conclusion of it all is in this line right here. For these treasures and everything that he collected in his lovely house were to be to him a means of forgetfulness, modes by which he could escape for a season from the fear that seemed to him at times to be almost too great to be borne. What fear is that? It's the fear that somebody's going to see his soul, that his secret is going to be divulged, that he won't be able to keep it forever. Anyway, upon the walls of the lonely locked room where he had spent so much of his boyhood, back to the picture, he had hung with his own hands a terrible portrait whose changing features showed him the real degradation of his life, and in front of it had draped the purple and gold pall as a curtain. For weeks he would not go there. He would forget the hideous painted thing and get back his light heart, his wonderful joyousness, his passionate absorption in mere existence. Then suddenly, some night he would creep out of the house, go down to dreadful places near Bluegate Fields, and stay there day after day until he was driven away. On his return, he would sit in front of the picture, sometimes loathing it and himself, but filled at other times with a pride of individualism that is half the fascination of sin, and smiling with secret pleasure at the misshapen shadow that had to bear the burden that should have been his own. After a few years, he could not endure to be long out of England. His paranoia is growing. And he gave up the villa that he had shared at Trouville with Lord Henry, as well as the little white-walled house at Algiers, where they had more than once spent the winter. He hated to be separated from the picture that was such a part of his life, and was also afraid that during his absence someone might gain access to the room, in spite of the elaborate bars that he had caused to be placed upon the door. So his paranoia is causing him to take action now. He's barred the door. He's done what he can to make sure nobody can get in there, but he's still freaking out that somebody's going to see the picture. He was quite conscious that this would tell them nothing. It was true that the portrait still preserved, under all the foulness and ugliness of the face, its marked likeness to himself. But what could they learn from that? He would laugh at anyone who tried to taunt him. He had not painted it. What was it to him how vile and full of shame it looked? Even if he told them, would they believe it? Yet he was afraid. Sometimes, when he was down at his great house in Nottinghamshire, entertaining the fashionable young men of his own rank, who were the chief companions in astounding the country by the wanton luxury and gorgeous splendor of his mode of life, he would suddenly leave his guests and rush back to town to see that the door had not been tampered with and that the picture was still there. What if it should be stolen? The mere thought of that made him cold with horror. Surely the world would know his secret then. Perhaps the world already suspected it. For while he fascinated many, there were not a few who distrusted him. He was very nearly blackballed at a West End club, of which his birth and social position fully entitled him to become a member. And it was said that on one occasion, when he was brought by a friend into the smoking room at the Churchill, the Duke of Berwick and another gentleman got up in a marked manner and went out. Curious stories became current about him after he had passed his 25th year. It was rumored that he had been seen brawling with foreign sailors in a low den in distant parts of Whitechapel, and that he consorted with thieves and coiners and knew the mysteries of their trade. His extraordinary absences became notorious, and when he used to reappear again in society, men would whisper to each other in corners, or pass him with a sneer, or look at him with cold, searching eyes as though they were determined to discover his secret. Of such insolences and attempted slights he, of course, took no notice, and in the opinion of most people, his frank, debonair manner, his charming, boyish smile, and the infinite grace of that wonderful youth that seemed never to leave him, were in themselves sufficient answer to the calumnies, for so they termed them, that were circulated about him. It was remarked, however, that some of those who had been most intimate with him appeared after a time to shun him. Women who had wildly adored him and for his sake braved all social censure, set convention at defiance, were seen to grow pallid with shame or horror if Dorian Gray entered the room. Yet these whispered scandals only increased in the eyes of many his strange and dangerous charm. His great wealth was a certain element of security. Society, civilized society at least, is never very ready to believe anything to the detriment of those who are both rich and fascinating. It feels instinctively that manners are of more importance than morals, and that, in its opinion, the highest respectability is of much less value than the possession of a good chef, and, After all, it is a very poor consolation to be told that the man who is given one a bad dinner or poor wine is irreproachable in his private life. Even the cardinal virtues cannot atone for half-cold entrees, as Lord Henry remarked once, in a discussion on the subject, and there is possibly a good deal to be said for his views. For the canons of good society are, or should be, the same as the canons of art. Form is absolutely essential to it. It should have the dignity of a ceremony as well as its unreality, and should combine the insincere character of a romantic play with the wit and beauty that make such plays delightful to us. Is insincerity such a terrible thing? I think not. It is merely a method by which we can multiply our personalities. Such, at any rate, was Dorian Gray's opinion. He used to wonder at the shallow psychology of those who conceive the ego in man as a thing simple, permanent, reliable, and of one essence. To him, man was a being with myriad lives and myriad sensations, a complex, multiform creature that bore within himself strange legacies of thought and passion, and whose very flesh was tainted with the monstrous maladies of the dead. He loved to stroll through the gaunt, cold picture gallery of his country house, and to look at the various portraits of those whose blood flowed in his veins. Here was Philip Herbert, described by Francis Osborne in his Memoirs on the Regions of Queen Elizabeth and King James as one who was, quote, caressed by the court for his handsome face, which kept him not long company. Was young Herbert's life... Sorry, I'm gonna pause for a second, go get myself a cup of tea. I have been reading for like 45 minutes, and we only have like 3 or 4 pages left. So I'm going to pause this thing, I'm going to go get a cup of tea, and I will come back and finish it up.